By Sunday night, a finance company's flatbed rolled away from my Aunt Denise's Upper East Side brownstone with a bright orange McLaren strapped to its bed, and by Tuesday morning, our board had an emergency session on the calendar to address my brother's leadership. That is how quickly the facade cracked. I am Samantha Rhodes, 32, Vice President of Marketing at our family-owned hospitality and events group in Manhattan. For years, I thought I knew betrayal, office rumors, clients who smile while they shop your ideas down the street, deals that die in silence. But I was not ready for betrayal with a house key and my last name. What they did not know was simple. I keep everything. Email headers, not just screenshots. Bank transfers with memos and timestamps. Security footage from our prep kitchen where we posted clear notice that audio and video recording is in use for safety. Vendor contracts riders and signed non-disclosure agreements that protect our trade secret supplier lists and proprietary prep methods. Organization is my love language, but it is also my shield. If you have ever carried your family like a second job, tell me where you are watching from. Drop your city. I see you. My brother is Brandon, 29, newly crowned Chief Executive Officer after a 60th birthday meets shareholder party that smelled like lemon tarts and tasted like deja vu. He is the golden child. I am the reliable one. That is the family story. It plays at every holiday. It had a playlist long before either of us learned to pour a glass of wine without touching the rim. Here is the piece you need to hold on to. 3 days before his coronation, an email left Brandon's laptop that canceled the Langston Manhattan Hotel partnership I had built for 6 months. $3.4 million, not renegotiated, canceled. He sent it using my sign-off line pasted beneath his. I did not know that on the day it happened. I would learn it later the way you learn a storm started miles away while you were sweeping a porch under blue sky. Another detail to pocket for the payoff. For 3 years, I covered family and company gaps with steady transfers that added up across the $500,000 mark. Roughly 40% of my pre-tax income moved out of my account like clockwork. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself loyalty was investment. I told myself later we would square up. Later is a generous word when you are the one paying. At work, I built a supply chain you could taste. Long Island oysters that still smelled a little like Tide. Hudson Valley produce that snapped under a knife because it had not ridden a truck across 3 time zones. We paid more and we got better, and I sold the story because it was true. That is branding when branding is honest. And still underneath the applause, the script was being rewritten without me in the room. I saw the first smudges when invoices from a national distributor appeared again, the same bulk supplier we had left behind. I heard the second when a private family thread cheered my removal from executive meetings and called it focus. I felt the third when a forensic accountant friend, Evan Kim, flagged metadata that did not lie. The sign-off on that cancellation was mine. The digital footprints were not. This is important. I did not yell. I did not threaten. I took notes. I called my allies quietly. Callie Price, our PR anchor who understands when to go soft and when to go loud. Evan, who reads numbers the way chefs read heat. 3 attorneys who speak employment, corporate, and securities like native languages. I told each of them I wanted to do this calmly and correctly. They believed me because my voice did not shake. And one more seed for what is coming. When that McLaren left the curb on Sunday, it was not because I pounded a table, it was because the lender and the bank did what lenders and banks do after formal notice of missed obligations and material risk changes. I did not need to shout, I needed to document. So how did we get here? How did a family celebration turn into a public reckoning and a controlled reset of my life? To answer that, I have to rewind to the pattern that made this outcome inevitable, the years when I was the dependable child and he was the chosen one, and all the small yeses that set up one very necessary no. Rewinding makes the picture sharper. Once you see the ending, the opening scenes stop pretending to be innocent. I grew up as the reliable one. I made lists, finished chores early, and learned to stretch $1 until it squeaked. My parents, Robert and Elaine, loved us both, but they loved Brandon's potential out loud. He was the future. I was the present tense that kept the house running. I funded my own degrees. Nights answering phones at a hospital switchboard, mornings packing bags at a deli in Queens for a little extra cash and a lot of free coffee. Afternoons interning wherever someone would trust me with a login. I learned to write copy that sounded like it belonged to design deck slides that spoke before I did, and to read a room 10 beats ahead. The day I graduated, I paid off my last semester's balance with 3 clicks and a held breath. No balloons. Just quiet relief. Brandon's path looked different. Our parents financed his prestige business program. They called it positioning. The heir to a hospitality vision needed the right pedigree, the right blazer, the right address. When he needed a bridge between stipends, a family card appeared. When he wanted to lease a car that turned heads, the down payment showed up. None of that is evil on its own. It is how families invest when a story has already cast its lead. Looking back now, I see how roles hardened into rules. Mine was to figure it out. His was to be figured out for. When I joined the family company full-time, it was not glamorous. I was not steering brand strategy on day one. I was untangling old mailing lists, rewriting tired web pages, and reintroducing ourselves to journalists who had stopped taking our calls. I brought in a camera crew to shoot what we actually did, well-warm service and clean flavors, and I begged for a tiny budget to do it. Every dollar I got, I stretched into three. Every win I got, I handed to the team. The supply chain was my proudest fight. We traded convenience for character Long Island oysters that told you where they had slept the night before, Hudson Valley greens that still snapped when you broke them, small batch vinegar that could lift a dish with one bright drop. It cost more, so I sold the story of why it mattered. Not fancy for fancy's sake, honest for honesty's sake. When critics started describing our plates as promises kept, I finally exhaled. Home was a different ledger. As my salary climbed, the asks arrived in a tone that made them feel like weather. Could you float a month on the mortgage while we refinance? Could you cover Dad's prescription gap until the new plan kicks in? Could you wire Brandon 5 figures because the program requires an overseas residency and the timing is tight? Could you advance a deposit to hold a new production space while we wait for the bank? I said yes again and again, and because I kept everything neat, no one saw the wait. I set up a recurring transfer that moved $18,000 out of my account each month. 3 years later, that line told the whole story in 6 words: loyal daughter subsidizes the chosen son. I want to be precise here because precision protects me. That $18,000 a month was roughly 40% of my pre-tax income at the time. I could afford it because I earned well. I chose it because I believed we were building the same future. That distinction matters. Generosity becomes exploitation the moment consent is assumed instead of asked. Looking back now, the clues were not subtle. They were simply familiar. There was the time I proposed a loyalty program that rewarded diners with something better than discounts, behind-the-scenes classes, small tastings, a note from the pastry chef tucked into the check. Brandon said, "Sounds lovely. Stay in your lane. You do brand. I do business." He said it with a smile, as if categorizing me were an act of kindness. There was the week a famous blogger visited and posted what I dreamed of reading. Our food tasted like it was made by people who knew where it came from. I brought the team pastries and framed the article for the office. Brandon skimmed it and said, "Good press. Now let's scale costs down to match the hype before the buzz fades." He called the switching back to the national distributor a pivot. He called our farmers a vibe. There were the meetings that began with "our executive team will handle this" and ended with me receiving the calendar invite to present without being invited to decide. The first time it happened, I brushed it off as a scheduling glitch. The 5th time, I wrote down a sentence in my notebook and underlined it twice invisible until indispensable. And then there was the dangling equity. Every December, my father would say, "Your ESOP units are coming. Paperwork takes time." Every March, the documents arrived with placeholders where my name should have been. Every July, someone from HR would apologize for the delay and ask me to sign a fresh non-disclosure agreement covering trade secrets, supplier lists, and proprietary prep methods that I had developed. Promise in one hand, pen in the other. I signed because I still believed the promise. Looking back now, I can see the slope I stood on. It was gentle enough to feel flat while I slid. My apartment sat a few blocks south of Aunt Denise's brownstone, where family holidays always felt like a magazine spread. Most nights, I walked home after service with my heels in my hand, letting the city cool me down. On one of those walks, my phone buzzed a late-night request to front a payment for a new executive assistant that would be assigned under my expense profile just for a month. White glove cards, concierge, booking the works. I asked for it in writing. The email arrived. I filed it. I said yes one more time, and I made a note to revisit it when the month ended. 3 months passed, then 6. When I finally called the bank to review the setup, the agent said, "Of course, Ms. Rhodes, you are the guarantor. Would you like to revoke authorization for future charges?" That sentence stayed in my head like a metronome. Would you like to revoke? Not yet, I told myself, not yet. The family narrative made the asks feel holy. We are a unit. We sacrifice together. But we were not sacrificing the same things. I was trading time, money, and sleep. Brandon was trading image for more image. He practiced speeches in the mirror and called it strategy. He called my caution negativity. He called my diligence control. And when I asked him to sit with a farmer for 15 minutes and hear how weather breaks a season, he laughed and said, "That is why I have you." Looking back now, the dynamic was not golden child versus responsible one. It was customer versus supplier. He consumed and I delivered. I was the service line with a family discount. I kept believing because belief is easier than confrontation when the people involved share your last name. My mother's voice was the softest trap. She would say, "Sammy, your brother is under so much pressure. Help him through this sprint and we can breathe." My father's voice was the firmest. He would say, "One voice at the top." That is how empires avoid confusion. He meant Brandon's voice, of course. He never said mine was unworthy. He did not have to. He did. So I coped how efficient people cope. I got even more organized. I built dashboards for spend and tools for tracking outcomes. I annotated every recurring transfer with a precise memo line: mortgage, float, tuition, hold, release, equipment, deposit, emergency travel. I believed validation would follow documentation. That belief would save me later, but it made me a better target in the meantime because people assume the thorough will always be thorough on their behalf. The turning point did not look dramatic. It looked like a subject line at the end of a long week: Langston Manhattan tasting menu revisions. I saw the thread, noticed my name, moved to the CC line, and kept pushing through deadlines with a plan to circle back. I did not. A family text chain pinged with confetti emojis about Brandon stepping into his destiny. I muted the thread. I told myself to focus on what I could control. And yet the math would not stay quiet. 3 years of $18,000 a month. A total that began with the word 6 and ended with the word 100. A balance of IOUs that never came due because no one had written them down, but me. The numbers asked a question I had avoided: if the support is forever, is it still support, or has it become structure? Looking back now, the answer is obvious. Then it was blurry. Here is why this part matters. Without understanding the sacrifices, the rest of the story reads like sudden coldness. It was not. It was a slow thaw from a role that had calcified around me. When the cancellation email surfaced and Evan traced its metadata, when the distributor invoices returned like ghosts, when Aunt Denise forwarded a group chat message that celebrated my removal from executive decisions, I did not discover betrayal. I recognized it. Naming it clearly changed the way I moved. I tightened my circle. I scheduled 3 calls. I documented every transfer line by line. I stopped agreeing to new bridge loans and started asking for dates, signatures, and board minutes. I reminded myself that love without boundaries is just a beautiful word for depletion. And as those habits clicked into place, the path ahead stopped feeling like a cliff. It looked like a staircase I had been building in the dark. The first step was seeing the pattern. The next step was catching the hand that kept reaching back into my pocket. The step after that would require evidence allies and a plan staged with more patience than anger. That is where the breadcrumb trail begins to turn into certainty. And that is where part 3 picks up: the canceled partnership, the forged sign-off, the overheard orders to cut quality because I could spin it, and the exact dollar amounts that proved how far I had been asked to carry other people's choices. So I followed the trail I had been stepping over. Breadcrumbs only feel small until you line them up. The first clue lived in a subject line: Langston Manhattan tasting menu revisions. I had been moved to the carbon copy line on that thread a few days before my father's 60th birthday shareholder party, and I had told myself I would circle back. I did more than circle back. I opened the original message with full headers, exported the entire chain, and sent it to Evan Kim with a single line: "Tell me what is true." Evan called me within the hour. His voice was calm, which is how he sounds when he knows I will not like what he is about to say. The cancellation email, he explained, had my sign-off block pasted under a paragraph Brandon wrote. The revision history on the attached PDF listed Brandon as the author. The timestamps drifted by 1 hour from my device settings. Even the document properties, the part most people never think to check, showed his laptop as the origin. "You did not approve this," he said. "He used your name to make the fallout look like it came from you." That one sentence changed the weight of the room I was standing in. It stopped feeling like air and started feeling like water. Then procurement pinged me about an optimization. 2 purchase orders had been issued to the national distributor we had replaced the year before. Shelf-stable sauces, a lemon-flavored powder that pretends to be zest, generic oils by the drum. I asked for the written approval. The reply came back fast. "Brandon has authorized a limited test to reduce costs while maintaining quality." I read that line 3 times and could not find the quality. I did not argue. I pulled invoices from the last quarter and laid them next to our vendor contracts. On one side, item codes that tasted like nothing. On the other, names and hands and weather. The savings column could not explain what the loss column erased. It did not even try. The next breadcrumb was sound. Weeks earlier, we had posted clear notices at entrances and in the prep hallway that audio and video recording is in use for safety. Most people stopped seeing the signs after a day. I did not. I opened the Ring app and scrubbed through timestamps. A meeting near the line popped on screen. Brandon stood with two managers. The audio is not cinematic. Kitchen mics never are, but I heard him plainly when he said, "We are cutting boutique suppliers. Quality's perception. Sam can sell it." My stomach fell the way it does when an elevator drops half a floor before it catches itself. I needed something outside the building. It arrived from family the way trouble often does. Aunt Denise forwarded me a screenshot from a private text thread she meant to send me photos of centerpieces, not that. In the freeze frame, a cousin typed, "He finally froze her out of executive meetings. Now we can stop treating her like a partner." Another line read, "Canceling Langston was the leverage move we needed." The cruelty was not what stunned me, the strategy was. By then, patterns had turned into certainty. I still wanted math. I exported 3 years of bank transfers into a clean spreadsheet. Month by month, the same memo line scrolled down the page: mortgage float, while the refinance closed prescription gap. Tuition hold release, equipment deposits, emergency travel. $18,000 moving out 12 times a year for 3 years. I watched the total crawl up the corner of my screen and stop at $648,000. You can love your family and still say out loud that a number like that needs to be named. I opened the statements on the executive assistant card that had been tied to my credit profile for a month. Restaurant tabs stapled to rideshare receipts, boutique hotel charges labeled as route scouting, rush fees on same-day flights. It was not criminal, it was casual. That kind of spending grows when it is nobody's problem. The bank rep's question from weeks earlier returned to me with a new shape. "Would you like to revoke authorization for future charges?" Yes, soon, but not yet. First, I needed the picture finished. The last piece was a draft in our shared drive. I searched for Langston and sorted by owner. A sanitized deck popped up with the title Final Approval Sam. I opened the version history and watched the edits march across the screen in colored tags. Brandon built the argument to pivot away from the hotel, then added a slide that summarized my branding concerns as the reason to cancel. A green tag wrote in my initials at the bottom, but the version with those initials had been created from his machine 15 minutes after the rest. In the corner, a tiny note said, "Editing rights restricted by owner." I took screenshots of every step. Evidence is not just what happened, it is the order in which it happened. I called Callie Price and told her what I had. She did not ask me to calm down. She asked me to keep documenting. "We will decide when to be loud," she said, not a moment sooner. That night I stayed late in the office and did something that felt small but changed the direction of the story. I gathered every thread into an evidence vault: email chains with headers intact, audit trails from the shared drive ring clips with captions, purchase orders and invoices in pairs, bank exports with clear categories. I saved the folder to a secure drive with a timestamp and read-only permissions. Then I sent a copy to Evan with the subject line corroborated. On my way out, I passed Brandon in the corridor outside the conference room. He was practicing something in the tinted glass chin-up shoulders, back the posture of a man who expects applause. He caught my reflection and grinned. "Do not worry about the Langston mess," he said. "I know it stings, but this is business." He tapped my arm like he was blessing me. "Stay in your lane, Sam." I looked at him and understood that lanes only exist when everyone agrees to the paint. I nodded because nodding costs nothing. Then I went home and made 2 more calls, one to employment and trade secret counsel, one to a corporate lawyer who could speak fluently about fiduciary duty and governance. I did not accuse anyone. I asked questions. How do we protect proprietary supplier relationships when a company officer undermines them? What happens when an executive uses another executive's name to cancel a material contract? What are my obligations to investors when I have evidence of misrepresentation? The answers were not dramatic. They were measured. Document, notify, do not speculate. Present facts. Before I slept, I took one more step that mattered. I replied to the bank's earlier email and formally revoked authorization for future charges on the assistant card lines tied to my guarantee, effective immediately. I asked for written confirmation and new cards issued without my name anywhere on the account. The reply came back within the hour. "We have processed your request, Ms. Rhodes." That sentence felt like a window opening. I tell you all this because discovery is not a single moment. It is a sequence you can prove. I had the forged sign-off on a $3.4 million cancellation. I had audio of a directive to cut quality captured under a posted notice. I had invoices that contradicted our stated standards. I had a family thread celebrating my removal from decisions. I had $648,000 in transfers that turned sacrifice into structure. And I had the kind of silence inside myself that means you are done negotiating with your own doubt. From there, the shift is simple. Suspicion becomes certainty. Certainty becomes plan. The next part is where that plan takes shape without yelling, without spectacle, and without a single step I could not explain to a regulator. That is part 4. When the surface betrayal cracks open, the deeper conspiracy finally names itself, and every breadcrumb you have heard clicks into place like a lock turning. Certainty changes your posture. It does not make you louder, it makes you precise. Here is the surface of what happened laid out clean. 3 days before my father's 60th birthday shareholder party, an email left Brandon's laptop canceling the Langston Manhattan partnership I had cultivated for 6 months. $3.4 million gone with a paragraph he wrote, and my sign-off block pasted beneath it. The attached document listed him as the author. The timestamps drifted an hour from my settings. The version history showed a last-minute edit that added my initials from his machine. That is not a misunderstanding. That is misrepresentation. Now the deeper layer. The cancellation was not a one-off decision. It aligned perfectly with a quiet pivot back to a national distributor we had already replaced. Purchase orders rolled out for shelf-stable sauces and lemon powder masquerading as zest. In the prep hallway under posted notices that audio and video recording is in use for safety, the ring mic picked up Brandon telling 2 managers we are cutting boutique suppliers. Quality is perception. Sam can sell it. Meanwhile, a family group chat celebrated my removal from executive meetings and called it focus. One line said, canceling Langston was the leverage move we needed. The tone was not shock, it was relief. The plan had landed. And then there is the pattern that makes both layers inevitable. I had been underwriting the family story for years. $18,000 flowed out of my account each month to cover mortgage gaps, medical costs, tuition holds, deposits, and emergencies that always arrived with perfect timing. In 3 years, that became $648,000. Roughly 40% of my pre-tax income went to keeping the stage lights on while someone else practiced speeches in the wings. I was the dependable one. He was the chosen one. When the room needed to be paid for, I paid. When the room needed applause, he entered. That is the architecture. Surface betrayal, deeper conspiracy, long pattern. The moment it all aligned did not look like a courtroom. It looked like a birthday party. We threw it at one of our spaces dressed to feel like home. Edison bulbs glowed under pressed tin. Vases breathed peonies and rosemary. Lemon tarts settled their sugar crust in the cool air. Through the skylight, the late summer sky held a pure coin of blue that refused to dim. The room buzzed with relatives and investors and people who always arrive early to touch the future first. My father stood with a satisfied tilt to his shoulders. My mother checked the angles of the favors, the way she has checked my hair before every photo since childhood, and Brandon wore a watch face so reflective it threw tiny stars on the ceiling. I remember holding a flute of champagne and noticing the condensation gather and slide like a single tear. Everything felt too sharp. The metal chairs, the laughter echo, the way the clink of cutlery sounded like rain on a tin roof. Sensory overload happens when your brain runs out of places to file what it knows. When the announcement came, our family is proud to name Brandon Chief Executive Officer. People clapped, because clapping is easier than thinking. Brandon hugged my parents, then me. He leaned in and said it softly like a kindness. Stay in your lane, Sam. I smiled because I have good manners. Then I walked into the service corridor and leaned my back against a wall that was cooler than the room and counted the screws holding a strip of molding in place. 12 tiny circles, 12 anchors. Everything stays up because something small and serious holds it there. That was the symbol I needed. I had been the hidden hardware for years. I could keep holding the weight, or I could take my tools back. Awakening is not rage, it is clarity with a plan. I opened my phone and scrolled to a folder I had created the night before. Evidence vault, email headers, ring clips with captions, side-by-side invoices from vendors with names and national codes with SKUs, screenshots of version histories, bank transfers labeled cleanly for 3 years. A formal revocation letter to the bank removing my guarantee on assistant card lines effective immediately, and the confirmation response time-stamped in my inbox. Every breadcrumb that had felt separate now connected into a shape no one could pretend not to see. I looked at the photo on my lock screen, a shot of the Hudson taken on a cold morning when the river looked like steel and light at the same time, and I knew exactly what to do next. Not a scene, not a speech, steps. Not. The first step would be quiet. I would meet with counsel and move the conversation from hurt to governance. Employment and Trade Secret Counsel would draft clear notices to protect proprietary prep methods and supplier relationships, all covered by existing non-disclosure agreements. Corporate counsel would look at fiduciary obligations and the impact of canceling a material contract under another executive's name. Securities counsel would map our duty to inform investors and regulators about misrepresentation and unreported supply chain changes. No threats, just facts documented and delivered. The second step would be boundaries with teeth. I had already revoked authorization for future charges tied to my personal guarantee. Next, I would request written confirmation of closed lines and issue clean replacements without my name anywhere. Basadi. On years, I would contact the bank about material risk changes created by the supply switch because insurers and lenders care about the difference between origin-verified ingredients and bulk substitutions. When institutions see risk in writing, they act. The third step would be people. I would talk to my core team, the 8 who could run service during a blackout and still plate beautifully. I would show them the reality without drama and give them a choice without fear. Come with me to build something honest or stay and make the best of what remains. I would mean it when I said both were acceptable. True choices are not threats dressed as options. And the final step would be stagecraft, not public shaming for sport. Public truth-telling with receipts at a moment when family and stakeholders were already gathered. Aunt Denise's baby shower in her Upper East Side brownstone would give me exactly that: 70 witnesses, a microphone, and a projector, all under a roof where people say they value love. I would make sure the lender had formal notice about missed obligations on the supercar, and I would let the lender's schedule decide the timing. If a flatbed arrived during dessert, that would not be theater. That would be cause meeting effect. Standing in that hallway back to the cool wall, I felt the noise in my body settle. I was done negotiating with my own doubt. I was done financing a story that required me to disappear. The betrayal no longer felt like a shock. It felt like proof I needed in order to pick the right road. I tucked my phone away and walked back into the party. I found my mother straightening a stack of plates that did not need straightening and kissed her cheek. I congratulated my father because I will not be the rude one even when I am the wronged one. I hugged Brandon light and quick and let him believe the night had ended on his terms. But quietly, the shape of everything had changed. The surface act was exposed. The deeper conspiracy was mapped. The pattern that trained me to say yes had been audited and named. I did not need applause, I needed precision. What came next would not be anger. It would be administration. Evidence packaged, calls scheduled, lines revoked, meetings set, a plan timed to real calendars, not adrenaline. And when the day arrived, no one would be able to say they did not see it coming. They had chosen not to look. That is where the awakening ends and the retaliation begins. Part 5 is the blueprint calm preparation letters that travel by certified male allies who know their lane and drive it hard, and a stage where the truth speaks for itself. Clarity needs a blueprint, not a speech. I started with the paperwork. Employment and Trade Secret Counsel drafted clean notices. Our proprietary prep methods, supplier terms, and sourcing playbooks are protected under non-disclosure and trade secret law. Corporate counsel prepared a demand letter on my long-promised ESOP units and outlined governance concerns around canceling a material contract under another executive's name. Securities counsel mapped our duty to inform investors and the state attorney general about misrepresentation and unreported supply chain changes. No threats, just facts stamped and dated. I tightened the money valves. I formally revoked authorization for any future charges on executive assistant card lines tied to my personal guarantee and got written confirmation that replacement cards would be issued without my name anywhere on the accounts. I notified our bank and carrier of material risk changes created by the distributor switch because insurers and lenders care about the difference between origin-verified ingredients and generic substitutes. Institutions move when risk is documented. Then I turned to the people who made our work matter. I called a quiet meeting with the 8 core team members who could run service blindfolded. I laid out the reality without theatrics, forged sign-off on a $3.4 million cancellation invoices that undercut our standards. Audio captured under-posted notice of family thread celebrating my removal and 3 years of transfers that totaled $648,000. I showed them a letter of intent for a new concept in Tribeca called Hearth and Steel, $2.0 million in commitments from a hotel group near Hudson Yards and a funding circle pledging $2.5 million to build it right. I promised fair pay, on-time checks, names on menus, credit, and press. I told them staying was honorable and leaving with me was welcome. Real choice is not coercion. We filmed our exit for our records. No shouting, no slamming. 8 aprons untied in one long breath and folded onto stainless like flags at rest. The security notice above the doorway caught a glint of light. The camera did the rest. We did not post it, we saved it. Next came stagecraft with guardrails. Aunt Denise's baby shower at her Upper East Side brownstone would gather 70 family members, vendors who had become friends, and a few investors. There would be a microphone and a projector. I prepared a short, clinical deck letter of intent cancellation metadata, side-by-side invoices, bank totals, and a one-page summary of governance failures. Callie Price, our PR anchor, cued a measured LinkedIn post about values and craft, plus a brief press note in case reporters called. We also notified the vehicle lender formally and in writing about missed obligations and the insurance risk created by misuse. They thanked us and told us they would handle their process on their timetable. If their crew arrived during dessert, that would be cause and effect, not a stunt. By then, everything was ready, evidence vault, organized letters sent by certified mail finances, unhooked from my name allies, briefed, and a calm stage set. I did not need a confrontation. I needed a sequence. The baby shower smelled like vanilla and peonies, and the kind of hope that makes everyone kinder. When Aunt Denise tapped her glass, I took the microphone. I kept my voice even. By Sunday night, I said an asset that does not belong to my brother will be in the lender's custody. By Tuesday morning, our board will meet in an emergency session. That sounds dramatic for a baby shower. It is not drama, it is housekeeping, and family should hear the truth in the room where love is supposed to live. Slide 1, Hearth and Steel letter of intent for $2.0 million in commitments. Slide 2, the Langston partnership, $3.4 million canceled. Metadata tracing authorship to Brandon with my sign-off copied underneath. Slide 3. 3 years of transfers, $18,000 a month, $648,000 in total. Labeled clearly as mortgage floats, medical gaps, tuition holds deposits, and emergency travel. Generosity is not silence. This is the record. Slide 4, paired invoices, origin-verified ingredients beside national distributor substitutes, plus a summary of the posted audio where Brandon said, "Quality is perception. Sam can sell it." He laughed from the back. "Stay in your lane, Sam." I did not look at him. I looked at our grandparents, at vendors whose hands I knew, at a niece who would one day be told a story about this day. "What you did not know," I said, "is that I documented everything. What you did not expect is that my patience had boundaries." The doorbell rang. 2 representatives from the lender stepped in, polite and professional paperwork in hand. They asked for Brandon, explained the missed obligations and policy violations, and requested the keys. No raised voices, no spectacle. A flatbed idled outside like a punctuation mark. They rolled the McLaren down the driveway as gently as if it were a sleeping child. A hush spread. My mother whispered, "Samantha, this is family." I kept my voice warm. Family is not an alibi. I invited anyone affected by the distributor switch to speak. A chef and 3 vendors took the microphone for a minute each. No rants, just clear lines about seasonality standards and what it feels like to have your work reduced to a margin. Then Callie sent our scheduled LinkedIn post live, a values-forward statement, no names, no subtext, just a choice about the kind of work we do. The apron video followed with a simple caption about leaving with respect. Phones lit up. A writer from Eater, New York messaged Callie within minutes. Food Talk clipped the apron video and set it to a track about knowing when to go. On Monday, our counsel delivered the cease and desist letter on trade secrets and supplier relationships, the ESOP demand letter, and notifications to the State Attorney General and the relevant securities office documenting misrepresentation to investors and unreported supply chain changes. On Tuesday, the board convened. Brandon was suspended pending an independent review. An interim CEO stepped in. I did not attend the vote. I was at a tasting with our new team, dialing in a glaze until it landed like sunlight on steel. My parents asked to meet. I sent a brief note, "I love you. I am not available to discuss this. Please direct company matters to counsel. That is dignity, that is distance." The aftermath looked quiet from the outside. Vendors posted open letters on LinkedIn committing to Hearth and Steel. A sous chef wrote a gentle manifesto about work that tastes like what it costs. The supercar stopped appearing in our neighborhood. Gossip burned hot for a few days and then cooled, as it always does. What did not cool were the consequences, governance, scrutiny, lender discipline, investor questions that required documents, not charm. 6 weeks later, we opened Hearth and Steel in Tribeca. The sky was so blue it looked painted. Service moved like choreography, steel fire hands, patience. Carrots tasted like earth and sun. Oysters tasted like tide and first light. Forbes ran a feature on our sourcing standards. Time Out called us a love letter to accountability. I taped both pages inside a cabinet and got back to work. My mother sent a long email that began with, "I am proud of you," and ended with, "We can fix this." I did not reply. My father left a voicemail about the strength of blood. I pressed delete and felt kind, not cruel. Brandon posted photos from consulting shifts at a cloud kitchen with captions about hustle. I scrolled past and sliced lemons until the juice stung a small cut on my thumb. It felt honest. We built a new family, the kind you choose. Evan at a corner table counting covers like a blessing. Callie at the pass eyes on every seam before it splits. The 8 who carried their knives into a future they could taste. Vendors who arrive at dawn smelling like crops and tide and leave with handshakes that say "see you tomorrow" without words. Here is the lesson I wish someone had said out loud when I was 19. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of boundaries. Love keeps receipts, and family is a promise you honor, not a bill you pay forever. If you have ever stood where I stood between the story your family tells and the oxygen mask your life needs, tell me where you are watching from. Have you ever chosen the boundary that saved you? I want to hear it. If this helped you feel less alone, subscribe for more true stories told calmly, with proof, and with heart. Sacrifice. Betrayal. Awakening. Measured revenge. Real justice. Then peace. I am Samantha Rhodes. I kept my receipts and I am home.